Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you again for joining us on our weekly podcast series sponsored by Liveox. Today, we're lucky enough to have Greg Mitchell, the CEO of First Technology Credit Union, on the line with us. Greg, how are you today?
I'm great. Yourself, Boris?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. Greg, before we get started, if you wouldn't mind taking a moment introducing yourself. Obviously, you've been with First Technology Credit Union for a number of years, but if you wouldn't mind giving a little bit of a background of how you came to be in financial services and a little bit about First Technology, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Boris. Yeah, I'm somewhat of a reluctant banker. I came into the community banking space after a number of years as a federal regulator, a few years as an investment banker, and then I chose to join a great company down in Los Angeles that was building some pretty exciting things at California National Bank. It was back in the early 90s. So I've had the pleasure of growing a few companies and repositioning them, and delighted to be here at First Tech. Over the last 8 years, we've grown the company from about $4.5 billion in assets to just over $14.5 billion in assets, and done a lot of that in an environment that's full of turmoil, but also opportunity, much of which comes out of the digital space, which is one of the reasons I'm happy to discuss digital transformation with you and your viewers, and talk about what it takes to be at least marginally successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a great topic, digital transformation. I think it's sort of on the tip of everybody's tongue these days. Everybody's trying to pull it off, some more successful than others, but very frankly speaking, Greg, why is it so challenging? Why do so many organizations, I'll call it, succeed versus others are less successful in making this a success for their organization?
Yeah, I think the problem is one of courage and perception. I think a lot of boards and leaders, think that this is all about technology. I need to buy a solution and put that solution in place, give the burden to my IT guys and perhaps some of my change management guys, and suddenly I'm going to be digitally enabled and have a culture that supports digital. The reality is, for this to succeed, it needs very significant buy-in from the CEO of the organization and a high degree of leadership and engagement. And unless CEOs and C-level team members are willing to commit to the change and the transformation, which means upsetting some people, breaking old processes, killing sacred cows, it's not going to be successful. It requires a fair amount of hard work, a fair amount of dedication, and a fair amount of commitment. So anyone that's looking to buy these technology solutions thinking it's going to be easy and thinking that you can leave it to others, they'd be mistaken. And that, I think, has contributed to a number of broken promises and missed expectations.
Got it. So, as you say that, where do you feel like we have the biggest gap? From just the standpoint, is it the project managers that are sort of not getting the buy-in? Is it that the CEOs or the executive leadership is too reliant on providers? Where do you see the biggest breakdown? Is it like a process thing? Is it a people thing? Where's the gap?
I don't think it's about project managers or technology or process. It's really about embracing a whole new paradigm, changing fundamentally the way you do business. Causing people to embrace whole new processes, causing people to engage with their customer or their member much differently than they passed, recognizing that some individuals in the organization won't have the skills that are needed to do that. So finding the courage to sort of help those folks do something else or bridge into this new reality. If you sort of try to hang on to the past while moving into this digital future, you're going to be impaired. It's not unlike sort of a prisoner carrying around a big ball and chain in the old days of prison movies. The legacy systems, legacy mentalities are a real deterrent to digital transformation.
Got it. And so you mentioned a thing like in terms of helping people come along, and I think that's a pretty important component because I think we're of course used to sort of the traditional, I'll call it the banking model that's heavily reliant on physical location, physical proximity, maybe heavily reliant on that sort of face-to-face interaction, which is now being, I'll call it, somewhat skewed from a digital perspective. How do you help people that were there to begin with sort of come along? How do you essentially, if you will, bridge that gap for them of the people that do want to come along?
Yeah, I think for helping people understand it, first you sort of connect up close and personal with how they run their own life. What they prefer to do is that they engage with other businesses. You know, how many of them choose to buy goods and services on Amazon? How many of them choose a digital experience for their music, a Spotify or Pandora or something else? How many of them choose to shop for goods and services in a digital environment versus going to the store? So people begin to realize personally that their world has changed and they are part of that change, and that I think they aspire as humans to remain relevant and engaged. And you speak to the fact that in order for the organization to remain relevant, we need to evolve, and for them to evolve and continue to be relevant in the workforce here at First Tech or anyone else, there's really a need for them to embrace this activity. And I think when you start to connect the dots between, hey, how do I engage in this world as a consumer? And what do I need to do as an individual to transform myself so that I can be a vital contributor to that new generation? And I think they also recognize that, you know, the cost structure for banking and for other services is much different than it was. And those organizations that are going to grow and prosper can no longer rely on, you know, fat margins and high fee income. You know, there's a fair amount of disruption, and those things are continuing to be attacked. So if they want to maintain relevancy, want to see First Tech continue to thrive or their institution thrive, yeah, they need to get in the game. And quite frankly, most people really get that. I think the job of the CEO and the change agents within the organization is to really have thoughtful conversations, not just say we're going to do this, but explain to team members why and how it benefits them, how it benefits their members, how it benefits their families. And when you have that level of engagement and conversation, you tend to find a level of success.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. It's a good point, and I think that's really, really important. And I think one of the things that you mentioned that's really important is staying competitive in this landscape that has changed over the last number of years. My question for you is, how do you handle also the naysayers, right? The naysayers that may be coming out and saying, well, Greg, you know, we're not a big, you know, sort of huge financial institution. We're not Amazon. We're not Google. How are we ever going to compete in this space? How do you address folks that are sort of questioning the relevancy of digital transformation specifically for their financial institution, or if you're challenging them on their core beliefs that they've been, you know, sort of led to believe over the course of the last, let's say, 20 years?
Well, I think in the case of First Tech, it's been pretty easy because we have the privilege of representing the employees of Microsoft, of Amazon, of parts of Google, of Intel and HP, and sort of forward-leaning technology companies. And our members help us to say, hey, you need to evolve in this space. So they're having those conversations with their team members. So if you think about it as a vice, our team members are getting this awareness from leadership about the need to change. They're seeing it in their personal life, and they're hearing it from their customers as well. And since they want to please their customers, you know, they say, hey, we ought to do it and we need to do it. And I think the other part is you begin to take some small steps of transformation and allow the organization to celebrate those achievements so that they believe they really can do it, and sort of move away from this. What's embedded in many organizations is that this is just another flavor of the day. It'll come, it'll pass, we'll continue to do what we've done. So we don't need to pay a lot of attention to it. You need to break that perception.
Yeah. It's interesting, you know, this journey, as you have stated, it's both sort of a people thing, it's a process thing, it's got a technology component to it. For a lot of people, or for a lot of organizations, this isn't just a flavor, this is sort of like a journey. And as you can imagine, in the beginning, it has its own peaks and valleys. And as you start to make these investments, at times the returns aren't necessarily there day one. Advice would you give to either executive CEOs that they may, how they may better position sort of this change, maybe even to the board, around the fact that, hey, we're going to invest. We're not going to see like a day one immediate return, but there is sort of this much bigger return at the end of the day. How do they bridge and how do they have that conversation?
Yeah, I think from a strategic perspective, they just have an honest conversation, much like the conversation that I would have with employees about the need to remain relevant and ask people how they engage with their financial institution. So the directors up front, see the future because they're living the future personally. And then from a financial perspective, talk about what they think it will take to move the organization from old school to new school. And from a financial perspective, you can use an internal rate of return analysis to say, hey, it's costing us $23 to complete a transaction with a consumer coming in through the branch. We think that if we get this digital thing right, that same transaction will cost us about 97 cents. Wow. So as we move to a place where margins are narrowing, where consumer demand is more significant than it's ever been, how do we do that? Because we know we can't sustain $23 or $27 or whatever the metric is for a pure sort of brick and mortar interaction.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, it's interesting probably what's also happened over the course of the last few months as the country has been going through this epidemic. Clearly, that has probably propelled more and more people to go to and utilize digital channels. What impact or what have you seen maybe that's surprised you, or maybe what has sort of caused you to double down on your vision of First Technology Credit Union specifically?
Yeah, I think this has been really good for the organization. It served for us, as it has for many, as a significant accelerator of the digital transformation. We're blessed to have a pretty diverse membership base of about 650,000 people that live throughout the world. While the average age is 45, we have a number of people who are in their 20s and a number of people who are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s who were accustomed prior to COVID to sort of migrating into a branch, having a cup of coffee and a cookie, speaking with the teller, getting a check deposited, and then leaving the branch. That population didn't really believe that they could successfully interact with their financial institution or with their money in a digital arena. Over the last 4 months, they've been doing that quite successfully. And we've seen here about a 60% reduction in a branch transaction, although many of our branches are still open, and a very significant lift in our digital footprint. And we know that because humans tend to migrate, and long-term patterns and behaviors are typically changed in 60 to 90-day periods, because of the length of this pandemic, many of the behaviors that have been learned and adopted in this cycle are going to persist. So we're anticipating on a go-forward basis, materially lower numbers of branch visits. And that helps us take it to even the next level of digital transformation, where we're doing much of our work digitally and causing our branch locations to really be solution centers to help people who have complex problems. And that allows some really cool things to happen for our people and some wonderful experiences to happen for our members. Yeah.
So as you're thinking about this, and depending on how long this sort of goes, this may go in many different directions. How are you, I think you mentioned a little bit of that, but how are you sort of reimagining it, if you will, the branch of the future, if there's sort of like a word for that? I mean, I think we had some idea of that, prior to March of this year. Has your view on that changed going forward, or what are you thinking the branch of the future strategy will be?
Yeah, I think our branch of the future strategy has been evolving for the last several years, because we've been on this digital journey for a number of years now. So we've changed the size and function of branch locations in many parts of our company over the last few years. We see them sort of continuing to shrink in size, continue to be much more focused again on that solutions delivery, instead of being staffed with 15 or 16 people, because you want to be, have all the right people there in case a member or customer walks through the door. I think you'll see more utilization of banking by appointment, so that staffing models will likely shift for not just First Tech, but many institutions throughout the United States. So that when a person comes in, they're going to be served, but they make an appointment just like they do at a doctor, with a DMV, with their insurance agent, their financial advisor. And that creates a better time management approach for the consumer or the member. And certainly creates a better resource management tool for the enterprise. And by the way, all that stuff can be done digitally.
Right.
And then you sort of overlay the need for human interactions to some digital banking and video banking components that will come in as well, because some of our folks still want to see a person, and they'll be able to do that through personal video.
Got it. Maybe, a supporting channel or supporting channel question. So, having gone through this sort of journey, if you will, from a digital transformation perspective, and now, having iterated more and more on it, we mentioned sort of the notion of getting buy-in early on in the cycle of this. But what have been sort of, I'll call it, if you're going to say the David Letterman, we'll go top 3 list type of things. What are the 3 things that you may recommend to folks who are maybe just getting started, maybe, and another 3 things for people who are sort of midway through the journey, having had these learnings?
Yeah, I think a shortcoming in our early days is we tried to cause the new technology to fit old processes. So we caused things that were designed to be much more streamlined and fast to sort of fit, to make it comfortable for folks to make the transition. That's a kind gesture, but it's really inhumane for the organization, for the individuals, and the product, because these aren't designed to have the level of processes and tripwires and delays that exist in the typical paper transaction or a face-to-face transaction. They need to be efficient. They need to leverage data from other sources and need to have a lot of the work running in the background. If you don't embrace the technology as it is and all of its features and cause your processes to flow around the technology, you're going to be stymied and create a fair amount of frustration. And I'm sure you've seen that at other institutions, personally. So that's a key learning. I think the second learning is to really engage seriously in change management. Follow an ADKAR model of explaining to folks, why this is important. Create the level of demand. I really want this as an employee because I think it's really important. Give them the knowledge of what it's going to take to succeed and how they need to change. And sort of constant recognition as it goes through. If you follow an ADKAR model in change management, I think that will serve you well. And be persistent. I mean, hang with it all the time. You are going to have a number of failures. You're going to have some hard times, some adjustments. It's not going to perform as quickly as you expected, but it will perform and will perform well.
Great. What about for people who are already in the midst of this, right? So I think because we have viewers that are sort of just looking to get started. We have other people sort of that are in flight right now. What words, if you will, of encouragement would you give to the folks that are in the middle of this process? Yeah,
I think if you're in the middle of it, hang on tight and have some fun with it. Learn. Feel free to make some adjustments. Feel free to sort of test and learn. Feel free to test, fail, get up again, and move forward. Secure some buy-in from your board and other decision makers that there are going to be some disruptions. This isn't going to be a perfect road, and cause them to be prepared for some of the bumps and twists and fallen branches that delay your journey on that trail. So bring people along, be persistent, have fun, and allow your team members to have fun with it and really celebrate the achievements.
That's great. That's great advice. Greg, we're close to our time today, so I really appreciate having you on the show. Thank you for all of the kind advice and words of encouragement to other financial institutions. Thanks again, Greg, and hopefully in the future we'll get to have this conversation in person.
Sounds great. Well, congratulations to you and the team for your continued success. And I hope these words from a community banker and now credit union executive help some of your viewers as they move forward on this path.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate it.
Thank you.